Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr and, of course, Kevin Noon. It is a Tuesday night CFP reaction show. Tom. How's it going?
Try to figure out if your stream froze or if there was an extreme commitment to the bit there. You never know on these Tuesday evening live shows, but good. Glad you were just being you and not being you with bad internet.
No, that's all me. Kevin, how's it going?
Doing well. Not expecting a ton of movement in this one since the top 10 was largely chalk, but it's a Tuesday tradition, just like tacos. But I'd rather be doing a show about tacos.
Oh, there's a show idea. Are we expecting any change? I think it's time for Washington to move ahead. And honestly, if they wanted to go ahead and move Washington to number 2, is anybody going to object? Really? I mean, come on. Anybody? Honestly, though, it's going to be interesting to see what the committee says. They don't like Washington's wins against Arizona State and Stanford because they were ugly. But they've just continued to put wins on top of wins. I don't think they're going to go to number 2, but they should at least go to number 4.
It does feel like they might jump to number 4 with Florida State having lost Jordan Travis. Florida State just not having any incredible wins. You look at the teams Washington's beaten, they have a better resume than Florida State. And I know everyone wants to tell me how great LSU is, and I'm sure LSU is a very good team, but LSU has lost to all of the good teams that they've played this year, and Oregon has not lost to all of the good teams that they've played this year. So I feel like the Oregon win probably tells me a little bit more than a week 1 win over LSU for Florida State. And I think at this point, Florida State, everyone is sort of looking at Florida State like, the old, like, if you can't spot the sucker in a room, it's you. I think Florida State's looking around the room right now like, wow, not a single sucker in here. This is great. I love being in rooms where there's not a sucker.
And Tony, you mentioned about having a problem with Washington moving up to 2. I have a problem with that. I think Oregon, despite head-to-head, is a better team. I think that they are a better team than Washington. So I would have a huge problem with Washington moving up there. And I understand that Washington's loss was not an SEC loss, which are the only good losses out there. But, it's all academic at this point. We're going to have a couple more weeks. We're going to have ranking coming out after this final week of the regular season, and then rankings coming out after the conference championship games. And the committee can reshuffle and restack the deck however the heck it wants to. So, this ranking means everything for 6.5 days.
And we'll go ahead and react as they're getting ready to. They're still doing some graphics. They're doing all of their CGI on the show, but once they get into it, there's Ward Manuel. They still have not yet kicked him out of there, so good for them, sticking to their guns. The head-to-head is going to – it can remain in effect. They don't need to do anything right now because those 2 teams are going to play again. In all likelihood, they will play again in the Pac-12 championship game. So you don't need to create a controversy that doesn't need to happen. You can just let them live and fight it out. The Texas and Alabama thing is going to be fascinating to watch as that goes on. If we talked about it for like 3 weeks now, is Texas going to remain the ceiling for Alabama? And I think that will be the case until Alabama beats Georgia, and then it's bye-bye Texas.
That does feel like – it feels like a lot of this is going to get – very obviously this is going to get resolved in the next 10 days or so. But if, a lot of the drama and the angst and the arguing that's been going on about all this stuff all fall, the Ohio State-Michigan thing is going to resolve itself on Saturday. Right around 3:30 or 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, one of those teams is going to be basically in. If you win that game and you lose to Iowa in the Big Ten championship game somehow, you're probably still in. You might be in as the 4th team, but you're probably still in. And if you lose, then you're doing what Ohio State was last year, and you just sort of cross your fingers and hope that a whole bunch of other teams lose and that your resume is viewed as strong enough to jump over some of the other teams that have lost. At that point, you're hoping, hey, Texas loses in the Big 12 championship game, and Florida State loses to Louisville, but Louisville's not deemed, worthy enough to jump over you, and Georgia beats Alabama. Like, there's a path for the Ohio State-Michigan loser to get in, especially if it's a close loss, especially if it's Ohio State on the road in a close loss. I think there's a path for that team to get in, but, it is going to be largely a settled matter by the end of the game on Saturday.
Only one team in the top 17 lost last week, and that's Oregon State. They lost by 2 to Washington in Corvallis. And so the movement that happens, if any movement happens now, it's going to be the choice of the committee. Now, clean sheets every week, new blank pieces of paper, so they don't necessarily have to follow the what they've done before. And honestly, if it is a blank sheet of paper, shouldn't there be some changes because the data is different each week? So I'll be interested to see if there's any kind of movement that way, or if it's just everybody moves up one that was below Oregon State. Penn State goes from 12 to 11, despite even with a 27-6 win over a very, very good Rutgers team. And here is the first bit of the rankings. Liberty in there for the first time at 25. Clemson back in there at 24. Tulane at 23. NC State at 22. Tennessee down 3 spots to 21. A 4-loss Tennessee Volunteers team down
Loading
4
up the
spots.
ACC. Loading up the ACC.
21.
2 unranked ACC teams have made it into the top 25.
Yeah.
Somebody's trying to protect Florida State.
Interesting. That could be, yes, NC State in there at 22, jumping up out of the rankings. Clemson is 7-4. I mean, I don't think anybody necessarily wants to play them, but they have not beaten. They lose some games for sure. Liberty gets that win, and so they move into the rankings for the first time. Tom, anything there that strikes you?
Exactly what Kevin said, that you've got a couple of ACC teams down in the bottom 5 there. I'm just scrolling through. What's interesting is North Carolina State is not a team that Florida State played, so that does not really directly help Florida State.
All right. Oklahoma State 20, Kansas State 19, Notre Dame up 1 spot to 18, Iowa down 1 spot to 17, Oregon State down 5 spots to 16 after that 22-20 loss to Washington. Kansas State moves up 2 to 19. Oklahoma State up 3 to 20. Anything there for you, Tom? This is a bunch of this is almost all 8-3 except for Iowa, which is in spirit always 8-3.
I gotta say, I think Oregon State dropped how many spots? 5 after losing.
5.
After losing by 2 to a team that's in the top 5. That seems overly punitive, but
Go ahead.
Have a conference, damn it.
Well, that seems like pretty harsh. I mean, Tennessee lost to Georgia by 1 million, and they drop 3, and Oregon State drops 5 for losing to a team that's ranked only a few spots behind Georgia. And sometimes that might tell you what the committee really thinks, that the committee thinks Georgia is really like head and shoulders above everyone else, and who wouldn't get murdered by Georgia? That feels like maybe that's the statement there.
Well, and Arizona goes to 15, LSU to 14, Oklahoma 13, Ole Miss up a spot to 12, Penn State up a spot 11. So basically everybody moves up a spot. Arizona moves up 2 spots because they just keep winning. And so that's everybody moving up from the Oregon State loss. And that sure feels like Washington's going to be 5 because they don't seem to be rewarding Oregon State for a tough loss in bad weather at home. And it doesn't seem like the Washington does much for these guys. They're going to have to beat Oregon one more time, I think.
Well, I think part of it too is a case of they like to talk about, well, we consider who's injured. The problem is that Florida State and Jordan Travis is out for the year. It's the other. I mean, he's done for his collegiate career. So I'm sure they're trying to prove a point. And when we're getting ahead of ourselves, we haven't seen who's 4 and who's 5. We're not going to punish Florida State for that type of injury yet. But it's coming. But maybe not this week. But again, that's all just speculation.
and so there should not be any more necessarily any changes coming up based on what has happened last week. With the top 10 should all be the same unless they've just decided to move somebody up, move somebody around. I don't know if they want to do that yet. And the most likely here is, I think it's Alabama, Texas, and I don't think they want to do that yet.
Yeah, I don't know that you need to do that because Alabama has not. I mean, Alabama has not like rolled up this incredible string of wins over top 10 teams, and I think Texas also is probably getting a little bit of credit for doing a lot of the stuff they've done over the last month. It hasn't been super impressive, but they've been doing a good chunk of it without Quinn Ewers. That's something that probably is factoring into the committee's decision as well, in addition to that head-to-head win over Alabama.
There's Louisville at 10 coming in, and I'm going to assume this will be Missouri. I don't know who else it could be at 9. Yeah, there you go, Missouri at 9. And
Talk
then
about the game I
barring
would want to watch a 9-10 game between those two teams. I mean, ugh.
yeah, no.
I watched Louisville, Notre Dame. I watched bits and pieces of Missouri, and no.
That'd be a high scoring game, I think, though. It'd probably be entertaining. That'd be a game you watch in the hospitality suites, and you're like, all right, I'm looking forward to this one. This is going to be high scoring. Let's try to keep up. There's Alabama at 8 as expected. And then so this 7 will be Texas, and 6 will be Oregon, and then we'll find out what they want to do with Washington. But it sounds like feels like we already know what they're going to do with Washington based on what we've seen. And then Florida just has to beat Louisville. And, if they can do that with their backup and stay undefeated, and, then they just don't lose to Florida this weekend. I'll say that. Don't lose to Florida.
Yeah, that's the one thing that would really hose them. And you wonder, Louisville still being at 10, that's a long way for Ohio State to, if Ohio State loses to Michigan, hypothetically, and, so it's a 3-point road loss, or they lose by, what is the spread now, 3.5 or 5, whatever, a 1-score loss on the road against Michigan, where you have a win over Penn State, you have a win over Notre Dame. Both of those teams, Notre Dame has USC this weekend out in California. They should win that one because USC seems like they're pretty much packed up and done for the year. Penn State has Michigan State this weekend, so that should not, they should win that one. They should be 10-2. I don't know how much, if Louisville beats Florida State, does Louisville finish ahead of an Ohio State team? I mean, that right now is 7 spots ahead of them. I don't know how much you drop Ohio State. Ohio State's not dropping 6 spots for losing to Michigan by a field goal on the road or something like that. So is there a way, how likely is it that Louisville jumps Ohio State if Louisville is the ACC champion?
I think that 38-21 loss at Pitt is going to be hard for them to get over. That's a loss. That's not a close win like Washington is being penalized for. That's a bad loss to a bad team in a situation that wasn't close. So it feels like they're holding Louisville back because they just want they don't, obviously you don't want Louisville in the playoffs if they can help it and they can get other bigger programs in. That's what you're going to do. But also that loss legitimately is bad. And Ohio State was going to be kept out of the playoffs probably for their loss to Virginia Tech in 2014, but they put up 59 points in a Big Ten championship game and showed everybody that they deserved to be in it, and then they were proven correct. So we've seen them penalized, Ohio State penalized for a poor showing or a questionable showing, a non-dominant showing in the Big Ten championship game in terms of seeding and things like that. With this is a loss to a bad Pitt team, and this is the kind of justification that the committee is going to, I think, stick to and use as long as they can, because certainly they view other teams better, and they'd rather have those better teams in.
Well, Louisville, I think you go through their schedule and they beat Notre Dame, and the rest of their schedule is nothing. They didn't play, there was at one point where the 3 undefeated teams in the ACC, which I think was Florida State, North Carolina, and Louisville. None of them played each other. So you theoretically could have had 3 undefeated ACC teams. North Carolina took care of that by losing a bunch of games, and then Pitt, Louisville took care of their issue by losing to a terrible Pitt team. I think they're going to run into a 2018 Ohio State situation where, they only have 1 loss, and they won the conference championship, but did you see who the loss was to and how many points? Like, I think, does Pitt have 3 wins this year? 2? I mean, it is not many, and they have looked terrible, but they always seem to, it's like Lake Lanier, just like it just decides it's going to eat someone at some point, and that's Pitt football. They just did it. They got rid of they took care of Louisville, and now they're done for the season. So are we ready for the top 6 yet?
Yes.
Are they still?
Yeah. 5.
Okay. Yep.
Oregon was 6. All right, we're
Georgia's
starting at
number
1.
1.
Georgia. Yeah, sorry.
And then Pitt is 3-8, by the way.
Ooh.
So they're opening up with Georgia number 1. So this is obviously the drama of the 4 and 5 that I'm going to assume they're building. So Ohio State should be 2 here, unless the Penn State win. Well, no, that was 2 weeks ago for Michigan.
Unless Ward Manuel did not recuse himself.
You could see Michigan drop to 4 after they look terrible against Maryland, but I very much doubt it because Florida State.
Boycott game day. Boycott game day.
There's
Rico.
Ohio State at number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Is the game day boycott on? Is that a thing, or is that just more Twitter bluster?
Can you take anything you hear from up there seriously?
Well, that's a fair point. So here we go. 3. It should be Michigan, and
Michigan.
of course, that will not stick. Obviously, there you go. Michigan at number 3, and here we go. Drum roll, please. I'm going to say 89% win probability for Florida State in this spot. Not to beat Georgia, but to win the number 4 spot over Washington. And we wait. And we go to commercial now.
Booger's got to say a lot, I'm sure.
Yes. I think Michigan's a good team. I think Ohio State's a good team. I think the number 4 team's a good team. Georgia is not as good as LSU. And yes, I did go to LSU. But we'll see. I'm glad I don't have closed captioning on.
Okay. You're like 15 seconds ahead of me, damn satellite.
Okay. Don't worry, I won't spoil it. I'll wait. As soon as I see it, I'll wait 15 seconds. I'll count it down and let you know. All right, here I go. I'm going to tell 15, you.
But it's...
As if the look of shock on your face won't give it away. Come on.
Because I'm very invested in who number 4 in the week 4 rankings are.
Who does number 4 work for?
Honestly, they are really... Oh, I've got it paused. I'm just kidding.
Well, if I got the number 4 up there before you did, then you probably were paused.
Washington at number 4 moves up a spot. There you go. Our conspiracy theory was incorrect. Our initial thoughts were correct. I consider that a win. Florida State is number 5.
Well, having your initial thoughts be correct and your conspiracy theory being incorrect, that's batting 500, which is 500 points higher than some other Big Ten East schools are batting on the initial thoughts and conspiracy theory things recently. So that's something. We have that going for us, which is nice.
How pissed are those 2 dudes that cover their bodies in sprinkles for Florida State right now? I mean, they got to feel foolish. I mean, they just look terrible right now.
Do you think this is what makes them feel foolish? If you're putting a full body paint and sprinkles, I don't know that there is such a thing as shame that you possessed.
Can I just correct the record here? That would be sparkles, not sprinkles. They're not dressing as ice cream. That's not the same thing. I mean, if you do think it is the same thing, remind me not to eat ice cream at your house.
Hashtag girl dad. I don't know the proper terminology. I'm sorry.
Sprinkles, sparkles.
In Massachusetts, they call sparkles jimmies. Not many people know that. That's a real regional joke for you, which I'm sure is going to land extremely well with a largely Midwestern audience. So you're welcome, everyone.
Fortunately, we have a large number of New Hampshire private detectives who
and in New Hampshire, they call milkshake scraps. I know that because I lived in New Hampshire for 2 years at PI school.
Thank you, Kevin. Oh, really? You lived in New Hampshire?
2 years.
Are you a
I
detective?
graduated from high school in New Hampshire at Ryan Day's rival high school.
Oh, really? And
Really?
have you ever been to Michigan Stadium?
I have.
You have, sir.
Maybe I'm trying to take Ohio State down from the inside.
Have you ever been to Ohio State's campus?
A couple times. Yes.
Do you have a camera? Do you have a camera?
At least one.
Do you have access to the internet?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, I do.
Intermittently, yes.
Not so
I'm
much
putting
on
some
campus,
things-
but here I do.
I'm starting to see a picture here, and I'm gonna have some people getting a hold of you. No, I'm not gonna swat you. That would be fantastic on the show, though. I'm not saying anybody should do that to Kevin during the show. I'm not saying anybody should do that.
No.
Of course not.
Only if
Never.
I can get my storm door replaced for free. I mean, it's on its last legs. I mean, if they're going to come in and knock down a door, make sure it's the storm door because it needs to be
Wrong
replaced.
door. So go ahead and throw some questions because I need to get off of this topic before I get in trouble and something happens. Do we have any starred questions that we want to? Oh snap! Butch Jones. I didn't want to say it, saying Kevin is the leak. I didn't want to say it, but I will read it. Kevin is the leak. I think the proof is incontrovertible, and for one, that's like 6 syllables, so you know it's true. And for 2, he has a camera. He knows how to use it. As long as he doesn't double punch the button.
I'm not allowed to find that. I'm not allowed to find that funny.
Yeah,
due to unrelated mishap that I have made recently.
Tom and I had a text message exchange today where I let him know that I wasn't being held hostage as I brought something up.
Now, Tom, you had that mixed up with you. You shut off the live stream
with like
days
800
back.
people on.
Now, Kevin, have you had a chance to see that your reaction was caught by some people?
Yes. I sent you the audio. I sent you the audio of it.
I don't. How did the video get out there?
Because I had 2 streams going. I opened up. I still had that chat going, and I started a new stream, but I wasn't looking at 2 windows at the same time. So that was running in the background as I was chatting in the dead stream, and I had to put a couple dollars in the swear jar because I said some naughty things, and it's made its way out, and it will be on the Buckeye Huddle blooper reel for the holiday party at Tony's.
Kevin and Sharon Moore, so many things in common. So many things in common. Tears, profanity, mentioning coworkers. I mean, there's so many things that these 2 situations had in common.
Yes, I'm not going to add anything else there. Do we have anything starred that we need to get to? And
I'm just going to hot punch some things. We were having too much fun talking about things that it's really just been more good-natured conversation and not a lot of questions. So I'll get to the bottom. Billy Tuesday, if Bama beats Georgia, they're in. I mean, looking at how the SEC could shape up with some of the things that could potentially happen.
I will believe an SEC champ doesn't get in. A one-loss SEC champ doesn't get in when I see it. But if there are 4 undefeated conference champs, and at this point there can't be, is that correct? So,
no, you cannot have 4 because there are only 4 conferences with undefeated, right?
And Georgia's one of them. Ohio State, and Michigan.
Georgia or Alabama, I think, is in. Almost certainly Georgia or Alabama's in. Ohio State, Michigan winner is in. Washington, Oregon winner is in. Yes, Washington, Oregon winner is in unless there's a really weird situation where Arizona State beats Arizona and Oregon picks up a second loss against Oregon State, but then Oregon beats Washington. Like, you'd need a bunch of that stuff to happen. Florida State, if Florida State wins out, I think Florida State's in. I don't think Louisville's in. Yeah, I think you could technically have undefeated Georgia, undefeated Ohio State, Michigan winner, undefeated Washington, undefeated Florida State in, and at that point, that's probably your 4 teams.
Super chat from Julian Foreman. Denzel Burke is out for blood. 35-17. Go Bucks. that was a really good interview with Denzel Burke. And if you have not yet seen it, go to our youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle page. Don't do it right now. Just do it after this and check out Denzel Burke. That's a guy who wants to beat Michigan really, really badly. Has not yet done it. This is his third year. So might be his last year, might be his last opportunity to do so. But a guy who learned about the pain of the series, the rivalry, they learned about the importance through the pain of losing that one, and wants to win this one, not for himself, but for everybody else, and probably a little bit for himself. But as he also said, for the state of Ohio.
Here's a super chat from Girthy from Berthy. Can Tony please ask Boo about Tennessee? I still can't fathom how they were ranked. No good wins and all ugly losses. I just need to know. I'm just going to run through their schedule for you real quick. Their big signature non-conference win at the beginning of the year was against Virginia. They beat South Carolina, who's currently 5-6.
And
They beat Texas. They beat Texas A&M by a touchdown. Texas A&M so good that they just paid someone $75 million to not coach their team. They won by 6 at Kentucky, and they beat UConn. Other than that, the ones that I skipped were UTSA, which honestly might be one of their better wins of the season. They beat UTSA 45-14, and Austin Peay 30-13. Their losses at Florida 29-16, not good. At Alabama 34-20. That might honestly be their best win of the season, is a 2-touchdown loss at Alabama. 36-7 at Mizzou, 38-10 against Georgia, and they have Vanderbilt this weekend. So yeah, I think I'm with it here because I don't know what's the case for Tennessee being ranked other than, well, it will prop up one of the two SEC teams. I think that might be our shining example of what they want to do at the top of the polls. You find out by what they do at the bottom of the polls.
It's because they're playing the game on expert level because they're doing all this with Joe Milton. So that makes it more difficult. So while all you guys are just playing at novice level, they're playing on Heisman level with Joe Milton submarining their offense.
Maybe it's based on how the speed that a football is thrown by the quarterback. Maybe that's one of the secret elements of the formula.
Well, I don't know what else you measure things by. It's either height or the speed of which you throw a football. I do always like to chuckle a little bit, but not too much, about all of the hype that Joe Milton had, and it was like his time at Michigan never existed, because when we saw him there, we saw somebody that was not an accurate quarterback, that had trouble fitting into windows, and I don't care if you could throw the football through that window. I have not seen any stories lately or any fantastic video packages about how he can throw a football 100 yards. If you're only supposed to throw it 60, you've overthrown somebody by throwing it 100 yards. And the accuracy needed for a 100, like, it's so meaningless that was such a thing. And now I'm not trying to be mean to Joe Milton. Lord knows I've been mean enough to enough college quarterbacks that I've had to delete tweets because, you feel bad about stuff like this. I mean, they're just people, some of them. And so Joe Milton not being an accurate guy, that shouldn't be a surprise. I was listening to a radio show today, and they were talking about, is it time to play the freshman? Is it Nico is there, I believe, and
Nico Iamaleava, yeah,
right. And you're not necessarily going to burn his red shirt at this point, and you need to see something. What's the point of playing Joe Milton against Vandy and in your bowl game? There's no point to it if you're trying to build something and be ready for the SEC next year, which is going to probably be better than it was this year. And you took a huge step back because of your quarterback, and you need the next guy to be as ready as possible.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. We have this one from Tom Blackburn on the screen, but he actually had a different one that I wanted to talk about first, which, just to keep it on topic from what we were talking about with Tennessee, he said, I'm confused. Whoever wins the SEC championship game is in. Why would Tennessee's ranking matter? Alabama beats Georgia. What is all the narrative going to be if Alabama beats Georgia? Yeah, Alabama's in, but how can you leave the two-time defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs out? They played a murderous SEC schedule all season long. Who could expect anyone to beat Alabama? Nick Saban, big elephant trunk, roll tide, Nick Saban, etc., etc. How can you leave? You can picture Kirk Herbstreit sobbing on the set at ESPN asking, how could you leave Georgia out? Tom Blackburn, they have a win over ranked Tennessee. This is another ranked win. The Volunteers, they're gonna be 8-4 after they beat Vanderbilt this weekend. 8 wins in a murderous SEC schedule. How many of those wins were against UConn and Austin Peay? To that I say, shut up. Let's talk about the SEC. That's why.
And you'll have a Tennessee team that can probably move up with that win over Vandy, depending on what happens ahead of them. Like Oklahoma State is one spot ahead of them. If they lose, then you've got you can move them past Kansas State depending on what happens there.
How many of those teams are going to beat an SEC team this weekend?
None.
Thank you.
None.
The jury rests. Top 10 Tennessee. Look, I'm not saying it's impossible.
And
You
really,
know-
if you round up, it's top 5. And if you round up again, it's number 1.
And if you can just get Tennessee past Texas, now you have a way to move Alabama ahead of Texas, because Alabama beat Tennessee. You can't put Tennessee up there without putting Alabama up there. It's like how how ants use each other to climb up stuff. That's how the SEC does with the rankings. They just climb up each other's bodies. They create bridges with themselves. It's fantastic. You should watch Nova on PBS. I saw a series about it, about the SEC
Gary Nova?
rankings and how there's a queen, and it tells them everybody how to build these bridges and climb up the rankings. It's fascinating stuff.
I would just want to let Kevin know how proud I am for making the exact joke I was going to make about a documentary about Gary Nova, former Rutgers quarterback. That's the best. The Gary Nova network is definitely the best network. Yes.
And he's the guy that I've had to delete a bunch of tweets about. So yes, this is all spot on and coming right back around.
Now, how can we get Missouri in the playoff field too, for a third SEC team? Because we're going to be at 12 teams next year. So, damn all the rules.
Well, yeah, you can't do it this year because they can't win the SEC championship. I did think there's a definite possibility that a 2-loss team could get in to the playoffs this year before this all started going this way, because there was no concern about setting a precedent and having to follow that any other time, because this is the last year for what they're going to do here, so they can choose to do whatever. But the way it's looking right now, I don't see any type of 2-team, and they're showing a chaos scenario right now on the screen with 13-0 Michigan, 13-0 Florida State, and then Alabama, Oregon, Texas, Georgia, Washington, and Ohio State, all with 1 loss, and how you go about choosing from that. But 3 of those teams would have conference titles.
Because an 11-1 Michigan team with its schedule is not really in a chaos situation.
Well, yeah, and I think not only that. I mean, first of all, the committee has judged Ohio State to have a better resume than Michigan right now, and the game's going to be played at Michigan. So it would be hard to if Michigan loses, they have a weaker case than Ohio State does, and that's before you even get to does the college football playoff really want the conversation around the college football playoff to be about Jim Harbaugh and Connor Stallions and whatever in heaven's name has come out over the next 45 days or so? I suspect that they would prefer that the conversation around football be about football during the college football playoffs, and sequester the Michigan talk to. I saw a bowl projection where the loser of this weekend's game goes to the Orange Bowl against Louisville. Like, that seems like a great place to just sort of sequester that whole conversation and just let the football be about the football.
In the opt-out bowl.
Yeah, this just feels like if Michigan, I think the playoff committee is probably, they're very impartial, and I'm sure Ward Manuel is not part of this, but I'm sure the playoff committee would probably be a little happier with life if Ohio State took care of business this weekend, and then they didn't have to deal with the Michigan conversation anymore.
Yeah, I don't really see any way that the losing team this weekend makes it in, because there's just there'd be more need for chaos than we saw last year. I think for sure, and I don't know that it really sets up to have that much chaos this year. So my suggestion is to go ahead and win the game.
That seems like tremendous advice. Yes, I think the top of the sport is not necessarily better than last year, but the top of the sport is a lot more closely bunched than last year. And you just go through the top 9 or 10 teams have really not lost to anyone other than themselves for the most part. So it has been a pretty, you have not had, outside of Louisville to Pitt, you really have not had like the shocking upset of the top 10 teams this year. And so that means there's just a lot more teams that are still in this legitimate conversation, which means it's much harder to sort of sneak in, slide in through the back door.
Boo Corrigan going up on ESPN right now to explain himself. And as one guy always calls in onto the teleconference to Boo, can you justify for me Tennessee or Georgia or whatever? Just you have to justify something because you have wronged somebody with these rankings. I want to throw this question out to you guys and to also the audience. With the Michigan game coming up, I don't really hear people talking about the playoffs or winning a national championship in terms of Ohio State. It just seems like the only thing that is important this season is this game. Whatever else happens after that is just whatever. But the most important thing right now is winning this game. And I don't hear people talking about can't beat Georgia, they're too good, or don't want to face Alabama, don't want to face Washington. Oregon is killing everybody right now. I'd hate to play them. The only focus from the fan base that I see is Michigan, and that's it. There's no playoff talk. The dropping in the seedings or the rankings, it is what it is. But I don't hear about anybody talking about the other teams or the matchups and potential matchups, Ohio State against this team, Ohio State against that team. It's just the only thing that matters right now. And truthfully, the only thing that matters is beating Michigan.
Well, I think it's sort of telling that that's true because for a long time, I mean, we were writing about this 3-4 years ago, the fact that Ohio State had not lost to Michigan with a full-time permanent coach since 2003. That was true through 2021. So you had people who were college students who had no recollection of Ohio State losing a game to Michigan other than 2011. And even then, they were relatively young kids when that happened. So everyone just sort of started taking Ohio State beats Michigan for granted every single year. And then it was like, sure, yeah, great, they beat Michigan. No one cares about the Michigan game. No one cares about winning the Big Ten. All that matters is winning in the college football playoff. And now you've had a couple of years in a row where they didn't beat Michigan, they didn't win the Big Ten, and all of a sudden now I think people are kind of going, oh, it turns out all those old people from the 1990s knew what they were talking about, that this is actually a really important thing and can be one of the defining things for an Ohio State football season is beating Michigan, because it is very hard to have a great Ohio State football season without beating Michigan. If they had lost to Michigan last year and beaten Georgia and won the national championship, yeah, absolutely. You can do it. It can be done. It probably gets a little easier to do it next year when the playoff expands to 12. But really, I mean, when we talk to Ryan Day and the Buckeyes, they have 3 goals every year, and the first one is beat Michigan. That is the first goal. It is sort of the baseline for everything, because if they beat Michigan, then they have an opportunity to get goal number 2, which is win the Big Ten. And if you do that, then you have an opportunity to get to goal number 3, which is win the national championship.
Back in my day, we had to play Michigan uphill both ways. But that was just because of the crown on the field, Tom. That's an old Lloyd Carr complaint about the, Oregon field?
Oregon. Or 2003, Michigan at Oregon. John Navarre could not adjust to the crown on the field at Autzen Stadium.
Just like the mound at Dodger Stadium. It was just too high. So, it's an unfair advantage.
And now how does J.J. McCarthy celebrate?
The crown.
An homage to John Navarre. Not many people know that.
I don't think anybody knew that until just now. So I'm going to jump off. I'll let you guys take control. And please, just keep it on the road.
I can't promise to try, but we'll try to try.
Now we can get to questions.
There we go. Let's get to questions. And before we get to questions, let's get to the point where you guys all hit the thumbs up button. That helps us build our audience. And boys, there's going to be a lot of content on this channel this week as we count down the days to the Ohio State-Michigan game on Saturday. There's going to be a lot of content here. This will not be the last live show we do this week. Rest assured, we will be up in Michigan on Friday. We will. The plan is to live stream Ohio State's arrival at the hotel. We always get a chance to talk to Ryan Day a little bit as he gets off the bus at the team hotel. We'll usually do an hour or so there. We'll try and do an hour or do a little bit maybe later on Friday night, and then more on Saturday. So make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Hit that bell. That way you get notified when we do any of these live shows or post a new video. And then also, if you were listening to this on Wednesday as a podcast, I had to look in the corner of my screen to remember what day it was. It has been a week already. If you're listening to this at some point later in the week as a podcast, make sure you rate us and review us. A 5-star rating and review is always appreciated. Helps other folks find these shows. Kevin, let's get to some questions.
Yeah, this Tom Blackburn question is the other one that was there. Committee basically telling FSU to prove it. Wait to push Ohio State, Michigan to the scrap pile after this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Florida State thing is... I think Florida State has kind of lost the benefit of the doubt to a certain degree because they have not looked great. I mean, I go back to the Boston College game. Like, they could have lost to Boston College. Like, that very legitimately could have lost to Boston College. They have not looked great for long stretches. Now, without Jordan Travis, I think they're going to make them earn their way in. I do think, if you just kind of, the status quo holds this weekend, Ohio State, Michigan, is one of them is going to lose, so they're going to drop. Washington and Oregon have to play next week. One of them is going to drop. Like, if Florida State wins out, they will still make the playoff in some form or fashion. But I think this is maybe a little bit of a statement from the committee right now that, hey, do better, basically. Because we have, I go back to the first year of the College Football Playoff Committee. The 2013 Seminoles had won the national championship. 2014 just kind of spent the whole year farting around and not doing a whole lot, and got into the playoff and then just got annihilated by Oregon in the Rose Bowl. It was 59-20, and that was the game with the hilarious Jameis Winston backward throw. That was a Florida State team that was just barely hanging on all year against inferior competition, and it caught up with them at the very end of the year.
Dr. Fauci's virus. I could care less about the national championship. All I want is to get revenge against a euphemism for Michigan. And, that's, kind of the point we were at. And I took the question from talking about we are not that far removed from a generation of Ohio State fans and Michigan fans that were used to one outcome. When I was a student at Ohio State, I took my sweet time while I was at Ohio State. I was there for 6 football seasons, and they went 0-5-1 against Michigan. I was there for the greatest win in Ohio State football history, according to E. Gordon Gee, a tie. And that was, so we're now at a point where the pendulum has swung a little bit back. Whether or not that was based on illegal actions or whatever, however you want to put that, and Ohio State fans want to try and nip that before it grows any more roots.
I wanted to get to this one from Nicholas Marconi. There was a point a few weeks ago where an undefeated FSU could have conceivably been left out, but that math is no longer there. If Florida State, I'm not saying this is likely, but if Florida State plays a terrible game against Florida this weekend and it's 13-10 and they win, like, congratulations, you won, but it's 13-10 or 17-14 in overtime or whatever it is. And then they play Louisville and they're uninspiring against Louisville, and Alabama plays Georgia in the SEC championship game. You get the Big Ten champion in, you get the Pac-12 champion in. Those teams are both ahead of Florida State right now, potentially, or Oregon probably jumps Florida State in this scenario. So Big Ten and Pac-12, say those are 2 in. And Alabama beats Georgia, but they beat them close, but it's an exciting game, and everyone concurs it's really well played. Tell me you don't think there's a possibility you get 2 SEC teams in under that scenario. I mean, if Georgia loses a very close game, the 2-time defending national championship, Florida State's looked messy, uninspiring for most of the season. They're playing without their starting quarterback. They just beat Louisville, and who cares about Louisville in the ACC championship game? And that one's, another close, terrible game. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, and that requires like a very specific set of circumstances to have that be the case. But I don't think it's impossible for that to happen.
I have a very specific set of skills. I think it is highly, highly unlikely just based on the teams that are out there and what is in the chaos muck. And I know that in your scenario, you have been able to jettison some of this with how things could happen. I just don't. I have a hard time believing that the SEC or anybody. I mean, and obviously the Big Ten would be the only other conference that would even try to have an argument for it, and it would be even thinner argument for having two teams in when you have all five conferences not mathematically eliminated, so to speak, here going into the final week of the regular season.
And Frank Carone's asked, "Can you get two Big Ten teams?" And good point from Jordan Madden. You would also need one loss. Bama would need Texas to lose a second game, so that would be another thing that would have to go in. Again, I'm not saying this is super likely. I'm just saying, would you like to bet against the committee putting in Alabama with a big win over Georgia, and with a win over Georgia, and also Georgia with a two-time defending national champion and wins over number 9 Missouri, and they just beat Ole Miss, and oh boy, have you seen them? And well, listen, who could beat Dick Saban? I mean, are you telling me that's impossible? I'm not saying I'm expecting it. I'm just saying I don't think it's impossible.
Well, I just don't think that UGA. This is not a lifetime achievement award. This is not a case of, well, you're the two-time defending champion. Well, congratulations. Here's a Laurel and Hardy handshake. I just, even if it is a really close and great game and everything else, I don't know if I just have a hard time with that if you're leaving out a conference champion with the same record. And I know that this was all predicated with talking about a scenario where an undefeated FSU team, an ACC champion FSU, pre-Jordan Travis injury could have been doinked off of the island. So again, I don't know. I mean, they start with a clean sheet every week, and they can kind of do whatever it is they want to do. But if you're guaranteeing one SEC team in there, you're guaranteeing one Big Ten team in there, you're putting in a Pac-12 team. That's 3 spots right there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and what are you doing with ACC? What are you doing with Big 12? I mean, are you going to sit there and have a? Are you going to be able to say, well, we're going to put a runner-up? I mean, let's be honest. Georgia has not played anybody with a pulse. I don't care what Missouri has been ranked. I don't care what Tennessee has been ranked. Okay, Ole Miss. They've played Ole Miss. And Ole Miss beat LSU, but that seems to be the trendy thing to do these days. Lots of teams are doing it. Everybody should try it. I have a hard time with that, but I also have a blind spot based on this whole situation as well.
Yeah, and I mean, we the Georgia team, going back to when we were talking about why would it matter if Tennessee is ranked or not. Georgia in the month of November would have wins over currently number 9 Missouri, currently number 15 or something Ole Miss, currently number 20 whatever Tennessee.
Like 12, but yeah.
12, yeah. So you've got 9, 12, and like 20 whatever. I mean, that's in your 3 wins in the last month, and it's a close loss to Alabama. I mean, Florida State's best win is against LSU, which is now a 3-loss team. That was week 1. And they beat Duke, who I don't think Duke is ranked anymore, and that's it. End of ranked wins list. And again, I'm not advocating for this. I'm just saying I don't think you can say that's not going to do anything. Moose 1066 says, why do people do the defending champion think defending champion means anything when you're almost guaranteed a 25% roster turnover? It's not really the same team that it was the previous year. Sure. Again, I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying this is going to be the narrative around that situation if that situation happens. Georgia has won 2 straight national championships, and they just won 3 ranked games in the month of November, and they just lost to Alabama, and boy, it was just by a field goal, and how can you possibly leave this team out? I'm not advocating. I'm just saying this is going to be the conversation.
Well, that's what Booger's going to say, and that's what the Alabama quarterback's going to say, and Peter Burns is going to say that. You're going to have your SEC block, and I'm sure that ESPN is going to have its marching orders of, we're getting the SEC contract, so we're going to say that. And, Paul is going to say that. But I don't know. Bilal says, did we forget about Ohio State 2015, Big Ten champs and 1 loss, 3 points to MSU? Nobody cared about us being defending national champs.
Ohio State didn't win the Big Ten in 2015. That was the thing. They didn't win the Big Ten in 2015. Michigan State won the Big Ten in 2015, and that was the one game they couldn't lose. And that was also a team that kind of did what Florida State has been doing this year, or what Florida State did in 2014, which is screw around with bad competition all year. That team was loaded with talent. They did not play like they were remotely interested in playing football for massive stretches of that season. Not saying Ohio State would not have put up a significantly better fight in the playoff than Michigan State did, but that's how that worked out, and it was that is a game that Ohio State should not have lost, but they did, and they had a bunch of games earlier in the year that should have been much better performances than they were.
I'm just answering a question. Tom Blackburn was saying we talk about the SEC a lot, and I said, well, if that's what we're asked about, we're going to talk about that. So let's go to another favorite topic while Tony is on with Boo. David Walker, will Michigan try and cheat in new ways this Saturday? Will they bug the headsets? Ohio State brings in its own equipment. You're not dependent upon your opponent to provide communication equipment. I'm sure that would be frowned upon. It would be like staying at the American Embassy in Moscow. You know that you're probably going to be sterilized from all the microwave signals that are going through all the bugs. But, I think that this is the best chance of a game being played relatively straight up with all of the scrutiny and the eyes of everybody on you at this point. But it also doesn't change the fact that they have years of your tendency, at least a couple of years. And I'd like to say that Ohio State has some plans in place for changing up how it does things, whether or not it huddles more or does wristbands or whatever the decision is in that case. But it's still not optimal that they have, their electronic gathering of information. And I'm sure Michigan has probably tried to talk to some of their friends in the world too about what did you gather from when you played Ohio State or whatever. And some of that, that's part of the gamesmanship, that part of it, going out and sending lackeys out there to go videotape signals for deciphering or whatever the hell you want to call it. That's where you get away from it. And that seems to be where a lot of Michigan fans, not all of them, I'll tell you that. I've talked to a couple that seem to be grounded a little bit more in reality. But it seems to be one of the simple things that a lot of Michigan fans are failing to grasp, or just maybe failing isn't the right word, refusing to grasp.
Yeah, I don't think, obviously the current or the previous method of cheating or spying was caught and is probably going to be a little harder to implement. And Ohio State, I'm sure, has a whole new set of plans for what this season, this weekend's plan is going to be in terms of getting plays in and all that kind of stuff. Wouldn't surprise me if you change wristbands after the quarter or after the half, something like that, and you've got new signals every quarter or every half, something like that. It feels like they're going to be, college football coaches by nature are some of the most paranoid people in the world. They don't want anyone in practice at any point during the season. Like, there are schools that will let, Pete Carroll used to famously let the media in to watch any practice they wanted to. We have not been at we don't go to an Ohio State practice between the about second or third week of fall camp and then bowl camp and bowl prep. And the bowl prep is only because the college football playoff or the bowl makes you let the media in to go see some of practice. So college football coaches are by nature sort of paranoid. So now that the old just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. Now that Ryan Day does know that and James Franklin and a lot of the other coaches do know that someone was in fact out to get them, I'm sure the OPSEC is only going to get tightened up. I saw someone asking, hey, what about the food and the water and the hotel? I mean, anytime you're on the road, especially in a rivalry, how often is there the fire alarms get pulled at 3 in the morning, or oh, there's no water? Like, these all get told whimsically, like years later, as like, oh, what a funny thing. Like, oh, every time we go to this hotel in Michigan, there's no hot water in the morning, or oh, there's no water in the hotel. Oops, this is a it all gets told like as like a funny story later. But that kind of stuff happens, and that kind of stuff is kind of part of college football. So that would not be unprecedented. I'm sure that at this point, everyone is ready for just about any possible scenario anytime they're going on the road in a big game like this.
Absolutely. And as I posted there, I had a buddy who ended up getting into the food service industries, like in management, high up in management at a hotel chain now. And he worked at the hotel where Michigan stayed during the 90s a couple of times. And he always threatened, I'm going to do it this year. I'm going to put X-Lax in their food. I said, well, let me know what life's like on the inside when that happens, because I don't think it's going to end well for you. They just posted percentage. Well, let me rewind it 5 seconds to reach the CFP according to
according to ESPN's. I'm not even looking at it, and I can already tell you every week these numbers are kind of garbage. But go ahead.
Well, I know, but we talk about it every week. I won't call it a data point. I'll call it a discussion point. Georgia at 75%, Ohio State at 63%, Florida State at 60%, Michigan at 57%, Oregon at 50%, Texas at 35%, Washington at 34%, Alabama at 23%, and closing out, the only 9 listed, Louisville at 3%. And that is per the ESPN.com/all-state playoff predictor.
Yeah, and that's that's based on previous seasons and all that kind of stuff, and win probabilities and all that. And I guess if we're going to read anything into that, I think Ohio State was 63 and Michigan was 57. So that gives you, you figure it's basically 100% that the winner of this weekend's game gets in. So that gives you an extra 10% floating around that, hey, maybe someone else gets in even without a loss. Or even with that we 57 and 63 would be 120%. So there's a 13% chance Ohio State gets in with a loss this weekend, and Michigan is a 7% chance that they get in with a loss this weekend. Again, I don't really buy these numbers, but that's sort of the implied probabilities there. I guess you also have the possibility that they lose to Iowa in the Big Ten championship game, so that knocks it down a little bit. But I think that's kind of what you're talking about. Like, there is a scenario where the second Big Ten team gets in, but boy, it involves a whole lot of other stuff happening. You'd need a lot of dominoes to fall exactly right. And it worked for Ohio State last year. That did happen for Ohio State last year, but I don't think you can bank on that happening again. Tom Blackburn said Michigan should have a better shot than OSU, right? I mean, currently Michigan is a favored, slightly against Ohio State, but I think it's the likelihood of Ohio State getting in with a loss is higher than Michigan's, because Ohio State's ranked higher than Michigan right now. They're playing on the road. If this is a 3-point game, Ohio State, if this is a 3-point Ohio State win, Michigan is less likely to make it than Ohio State is if they lose. So yeah, I think that's what that would be. Again, I don't really buy that all that much. I don't really buy those numbers generally all that much. I think there's a lot of false precision there, but either way.
Well, but they, they're playoff predictor numbers and they're made up metrics, and it is what it is, and you don't know what's going to happen, and we've seen wild swings on these numbers. Ohio State coming into the season was favored in every game, and then until it wasn't, and we see where their FPI has it going one way and Vegas odds have it going another way. I mean, again, discussion points, is nothing else.
All right, here's one from Rusty Jesse. Steve H. No, that's obvious. S. Hellwagon on Bucknuts said, if you're going to the game on Saturday, keep your mouth shut. Be careful about where you wear OSU clothing. He thinks things could get out of hands in the stands. I think that's probably, I mean, to a certain degree, that's probably not bad advice for any time you go on the road, regardless of where you're going. If you're going to see Ohio State play at I don't know, like Illinois, I can't imagine there's going to be that. It's going to be that hostile, but that's probably not terrible advice anywhere you go. That's definitely not terrible advice when you're playing, a high profile game like this, Ohio State, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, something like that. Especially this weekend, I don't know quite what to expect other than it's going to be hostile. There's going to be a lot of anger. It is probably a very good thing. This is the first time I've really looked at the Ohio State Michigan game and thought, the old thing where they'll never play that at night because they don't want people to have all day to drink before the game. Like that was a 3:30 game once. That was a 3:30 game in 2006, and that's the only time I can ever remember it not being a noon game. It's just very traditionally been a noon game, and it's probably for the best that it's a noon game. This year, I think with all the other stuff going on, I think I see that more than any other year before.
Yeah, it's not going to be any more dangerous than going to an NFL game or a Dodgers game or something like that. And I probably shouldn't make light of that because we've seen some various serious things happen in terms of brawls and things, and even worse out in parking lots. But I think there is a lot of anger. I think in a lot of ways, Michigan feels backed into a corner with, I don't want to say the future of their program. Michigan football is not going to get the death penalty. It's not going to get the SMU treatment. It's not going to be taken off TV or any of that. But I think that there's certainly a feeling of being pushed into a corner. And when you push a living creature into a corner, there's no flight. There's only fight at that point. And get a couple pops in you and you start popping off a little bit and things can get out of control quickly. I say, if you're going, wear your Buckeye gear, be happy with all of that. Just don't go looking for trouble, because trouble will find you if you do that. Don't go out there looking to pick a fight unless that's what you do. And then, buyer beware, talk about F around and find out.
Yeah. And just a little life advice for you: don't get in fights. Like, bad stuff can happen. You have one punch and either you hit your head on the ground or someone else hits their head on the ground, especially concrete or something like that. That is when very bad things happen. That's when involuntary manslaughter charges, like, don't do that. That is a bad idea. Football is arguably not one of the things that's worth fighting to the death over. That's my personal opinion. But I would consider not doing that this weekend. I can tell you I have, as a Mets fan, worn Mets stuff into Yankee Stadium for a Subway Series game back in 2000, sat in the upper deck of Yankee Stadium in Mets stuff, and my advice to you is just, don't make a scene, don't make a spectacle, don't talk trash, it's fine, you can go have fun, and the vast majority of people there are going to be fine, and probably treat you perfectly fine if you're not there, creating issues for yourself. So, and just make note of, they will put something on the screen that says, hey, if you are, if you have issues in the stands, text whatever. At Ohio State, it's text Brutus to some number with the issue and where you are. Make note of that and have a plan. Know where your closest exits are. This is good advice anywhere you go. Oh, hey, Tony's back.
I will say in regards to that, to quote the Beatles, the love you make is equal to the love you take. If you're kind to the people around you, they should be just fine to you. Now, I will say back in 1995, after Tim Biakabatuka went wild and we were leaving the stadium as college kids, we had an 8-year-old and a 7-year-old flipping us off, and their parents were just laughing. And then we had cops taunting us. So believe me, we wanted to get in some fights. We would have taken them 2 kids. I don't know about the cop. He was on a horse. The horse probably could have taken us, but we were the better part of valor in there, if you will. So
if you were a Cincinnati basketball player, you just punch that horse.
Yeah. You see, this is Kevin again. I was going to make the Art Long joke, and Kevin beat again. Kevin is on fire tonight. It's impressive.
Well, anything that resembles and that can invoke also Mongo Kevin's going to be right there, and he's going to talk about it.
Mongo just pawn.
So let's talk about what they had to say in terms of Ohio State and Michigan. Obviously, both teams good on both sides of the ball. They are, you might be surprised, they're looking forward to seeing that game this weekend. The committee is still, the close wins for Washington over Stanford and Arizona are still a factor, but not so much of a factor that they kept them from jumping Florida State. And so why did Florida State get jumped? Obviously, Jordan Travis being injured is a factor, but the quote was, this move had a lot to do with Washington. So wink, wink. This was about Washington.
Did it get addressed that Washington's win that was 2 points was so impressive that they moved up, but Oregon State's loss, which was by 2 points to a team that moved up, was so bad that they moved down 5 spots? Was that addressed at all?
We don't have time for follow-ups now. We have to move on. No, it was not.
Lightning round.
One of the things that they're asked about Ohio State, what do you like about Ohio State? What do you like about Michigan? Mentioned that they like that Ohio State put up 430 yards against Minnesota last week, which are words that have never been uttered before in the history of mankind. So that was something. They did, in terms of the Florida State, they did like the fact that they scored 58 straight against North Alabama, but of course not enough. A Georgia writer calls in to ask if the Bulldogs are even more decisive now after getting such a good win on the road at Tennessee. And they did mention that Georgia going and scoring on 6 of their first 8 drives against that really good Tennessee team was, quote, incredibly impressive. In terms of Tennessee themselves, why Tennessee at number 21 right now, the last question of the session, they've been a really good team early in the year. And then they mentioned the losses to Alabama, Missouri, and Georgia. They've played a tough schedule. They can run the ball. They have good guys up front defensively. Then the quote, they continue to impress the committee. And then he adds, again, there are 13 people on the committee. So this is mainly like Boo saying, ain't me. It's not me. There are 12 others out here putting Tennessee on here.
Tennessee, win versus Virginia, 49-13. Win versus Austin Peay, 30-13. Win versus UTSA, 45-14. Win versus South Carolina, 41-20. Win versus Texas A&M, 20-13. Win at Kentucky, 33-27. Win versus UConn, 59-3. End of the left side of the line in your record.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Right. Can you be more specific about when they've had, they've played a hard schedule. So has Vanderbilt. They've played basically the same schedule. Why is Vanderbilt not ranked? Do you hate Vanderbilt? Is it because they don't have enough wins over UConn? Yeah, that's. I didn't have a particularly strong opinion on Tennessee until I actually looked at their schedule and it was like, oh, they've beaten no one. Your best win is like South Carolina, maybe.
And as to why Vanderbilt isn't ranked, Tom, it's because they don't rank 26 teams. They only rank 25. If they had ranked 26, Louisville was asked about how much, if they win the ACC championship, would that propel them? And obviously they don't project, but they just said that would be a big factor, of course, because they do factor in the conference titles. They said the win over Notre Dame and the win last week at Miami were both impressive. They find ways to win, which is true, except for the one time they didn't against a very bad team, and that they're running the ball at a very high level right now. So that was the gist. Again, not much to really digest or talk about this week other than they always throw us some sort of a silly bone, and Tennessee Volunteers perhaps the silliest.
Did anybody demand satisfaction on the call, coming in and demand answers or justification, as you put it, pre-boo call?
Nope. There was somebody that slapped him with a white glove. I don't know what that was about, but no. Super chat?
The super chat, Jordan Kapler. Don't make a scene. Don't make a spectacle. Cover your rear and mind your... All right. Thank you, Jordan. At least that was not
Jordan,
a reference to me, I hope.
Kevin. Well,
the year of is over, by the way. It's like a month and 10 days, and then I don't care who the hammer falls on. It's just not me.
I don't know who else it could be. Maybe this is going to be a snake draft.
No, wrong.
So, did we get everything covered? Have we taken care of everything
Yes.
that we need to take care
Yeah,
of?
more or less. I
Yes.
mean, we didn't see a ton of movement. People are not going to get shortchanged. We're not going to be considered cowards for not going live this week. People, I mean, just set a place for us at Thanksgiving dinner. We may just show up and start talking about Buckeye football. You just don't know. It's like putting milk and cookies out for Santa or ketchup for Tony.
It's always great to go over to somebody's house for dinner and then start asking for super chats. You want get some turkey, some mashed potatoes, and get any of the super chats over there. But want to thank you if you have not hit the thumbs up, and I know you have, but if you haven't, go ahead and do that now. And of course, we will invite you to check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member for the price of a lousy chain store pizza. That's all it takes, and you can check us out and see us on the message board, see what's going on there. A ton of stuff going on. Obviously, there's the full-fledged Michigan debacle, cheating scandal conversation going on there. So check that out. Not just check that out, but check everything out at the message board, and also beyond the paywall for the articles and things like that. The X's and O's, all of their shows. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.